All right, good evening, everybody. It is Tuesday, February 28, 2023, and welcome back to Project We Inspire Facebook platform and YouTube channel. My name is Rachel Maying. I'm your host. Thank you again so much for all the continued support and love for making this platform and YouTube channel continue for almost 3 years now. So I'm so excited and happy. Today we have a special guest from Minnesota, but before I introduce our guest, I would like to disclose a disclaimer that our guest, Maipacher, is going to be sharing sensitive personal experiences that include suicidal and homicidal experiences and content. So please do not continue watching this episode if you are actively experiencing mental health conditions and or suicide ideations, homicide ideations. You're prone to be triggered by sensitive topics like murder, suicide, suicidations, homicidations. And if you're feeling unsafe, please call 911, go to your nearest hospital and or get urgent or emergency assistance. And if you guys need any resources, feel free to message us or comment and we will assist you the best that we can. But going back to Project We Inspire, we are here again to highlight and share people's journeys and stories of how they overcame obstacles and challenges while pursuing and achieving their goals, dreams, and passions. So we want to welcome Maipacher from Minnesota. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
So I've been waiting for Maipacher for a few months now, and we had originally had this
Yeah.
interview back in November, but of course the holidays and everything. So I'm so glad and so blessed that you were able to talk with us this evening.
Thank you.
All right. So for those of you who haven't really maybe learned or know about Maipacher's background, I'm going to give a little introduction. So Maipacher Hawkins is a poet, a writer, and a teaching artist. Her works seek to navigate conversations of mental health, grief, and mourning, a theme she struggled with throughout as a child, teenager, and a young adult after the loss of her father to homicide. Having overcome an almost decade-long depression, she now leads creative and educational workshops with youths, adults, and community leaders. She has worked with nonprofit organizations, including Project Chandu and Minnesota Jeju. While she continues to share her story and work in mental health awareness, Maipacher extends her work to portrait art as well. So thank you, Maipacher, for being here with us this evening and for taking the time out of your super busy schedule because I know you're a mom of three.
Yes.
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 And so thank you so much for sharing your journey with Project Inspire. And excuse me, everybody, I do have a cold and I barely got over it. So if I'm sniffling, coughing, excuse me for that. So let's start out with your childhood and where you grew up and how your childhood was like. How was that like for you, Maipacher?
hmm So I grew up, born and raised in St. Paul, Minnesota. I would say I had a pretty good childhood. I think without really realizing it, I probably had it better than most people. My dad was educated, so back in Laos and Thailand. And then my mom wasn't, but she was always working 2 to 3 jobs just to support us. So, and then my dad also is, I don't know if he was a clan leader per se, but he was out of the cousins. He was like Law, they would call him Law, and um, the kids that I grew up with, my cousins my age would call him grandpa. So in a way I had like this authority to them as well. I was like Dunyang. And so he was well respected. We were the household that everybody came to when there were ever any issues or problems to shita, and problem solve. So I think I had a really good childhood growing up. Actually, it was until I was about 11 years old. My dad had an affair for, at least from what I knew, 2 years, but 11 was kind of when everything culminated. It really came to surface and
Mm.
tore the family apart. And, you know, being unable to bear it any longer, my mom eventually took his life. So she actually stabbed him in the home that I grew up in.
Mm.
Um, yes. And so that night, my dad passed away. My mom was, taken away as well, and eventually incarcerated, put into prison. And then, uh, obviously, that was not an easy thing to go through. So
Mhm.
I struggled through about a decade long depression, and yeah.
Oh, wow. I'm so sorry and sad to hear that all of that had occurred in your life where, your parents were not able to get through their challenges, right, in their marriage.
Mhm.
And it's, as we were talking the other day, it's quite common that
Yeah.
um, parents, often have these struggles in their marriages, but they also don't know how to cope with them.
Hmm.
So thank you again for your courage and for being so brave to telling us your personal story, because it does take a while to process and to fully understand like what happened. So here I'm thinking, there's a few of us in the community, of course, that have similar backgrounds, who endured suffering and similar pain. And now reflecting back to your life after those 11 years, 10, 11 years now, um, knowing that your mom, your family, your siblings, when you guys found out about the affair, you mentioned that your mom had a really hard time coping with your dad's affair. And so what do you think, you know, was going through that time that you can identify for some of our audience? Because I think when you're so young, being 10, 11
Hmm.
years old, there's different signs and there's different dynamic changes, and you don't really know as a kid that perhaps to educate others more, especially when you're a young child, you don't really know. Um, what were some of the things that you noticed?
Yeah. Um, like I said, I was so young. I
Mhm.
think I understood some of the things that were going on. Like I understood some of the changes in our family
Yeah.
dynamic, right? But I don't think I understood the weight of them. I
Mhm.
I don't think I understood the potential outcomes. Like, you know how we always think, um, we hear people's stories and we think, oh, that would never be me, or um, what's the saying, like, she's Joyuna, like
Yeah. Yeah.
that's not me, that you can't fathom that. Um, and that was me. So, uh, it's not easy seeing it when you're in it,
Mhm.
especially being a child. So now that I'm older, I think I definitely see a lot of the changes.
Mhm.
Like my dad had an affair, and we had lao toshita. So I remember things like that.
Mhm.
Constant meetings, right? Like I mentioned earlier,
Mhm.
we held those meetings for other people, but
Yeah.
then eventually I realized that, oh, okay, these meetings are for us.
Mhm.
Um, like it's the little things. I remember going to the store and grocery shopping, because that's what my mom was a really good hostess. Right? So every
Mhm.
time didn't even my mom would go and buy like
Mhm.
all these things to draw people don't know, and
Yeah.
feel comfortable. And so I remember doing those things and then realizing, oh, leto shita about kunahakuchi.
Mhm.
And then seeing those more and more frequently, and the understanding a little bit more the conversations around the house. Behavior changes also. I know we talked about this last time, but like my mom would call me um, before I go to school,
Mhm.
and she would just say stuff like "Kuluka," or just like inquiring about me, or do
Mhm.
you know that I love you? Things like that, which. Bây giờ mong biết chị cho hay hết à? And
Right.
so
Right.
it was like awkward. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, yeah. Gee, thanks, mom. Just little things like that. Also just going places. My mom would take me to, the mistress house once, and we were in front of the house, and I didn't know where we were, but she was scouting up my dad's car. Oh, sorry for that.
Mhm.
And then going to my school. because he was supposed to be at a conference, and she's
Mhm.
just checking on his whereabouts to see if he was where he was supposed to be. And
Mhm.
like, again, kind of understanding some of the things, but not fully understanding the weight of them. And then now looking back, um, it all makes sense, you know.
Yeah. And that's a great observation now reflecting back on it, because we don't even sometimes understand, and I sure didn't as a young child, because my parents, we went through a lot of family dynamics and challenges. And I won't disclose too much, but I know that we
Mhm.
also had a lot of meetings, like our conversation the other day. And you don't even know that sometimes, like you said, the weight and the
Yeah,
seriousness of the issues,
yeah.
because you're not informed or you don't really know what to ask. So
Hmm.
I think that it's um, important for a lot of young kids and adults to know that when you have more frequent meetings, and like you said, it's awkward when your mom doesn't normally say I love you or checks in on you
Hmm.
a lot, and all of a sudden I love you, okay?
Yeah, yeah,
Like it's a little
yeah.
bit more sweeter.
Hmm.
That's definitely an indicator that something is not right or
Right.
something is off. But
Hmm.
definitely going to the mistress house, checking in on your dad's whereabout. I have heard so many times, including my personal story, that mom takes you to the other woman's house. And
Hmm.
when you're 10, 11, 12 years old, you don't really grasp that. Like you said, you don't comprehend it. You don't even really understand how serious that is, and how much it's impacted, right? How it marks
Yeah.
your memories and stuff. So I think those are good indicators to know that something is not right, and that perhaps there's different avenues and outlets to seek
Hmm.
support, right?
Hmm.
So with that said, in general, you mentioned the relatives weren't the greatest of help. And in respect, right, to the Hmong community, that there is, as we had said the other day, there is a perspective and there's a sense of reality to things that are not, in a sense, real either. And it's quite common in our Hmong community and Hmong people, and most ethnic communities, that they don't really talk about the situation in details, and so that it
Yeah.
leads to these kind of tragedies. Um, so now looking back, um, what were some of the things that you think we can, let's say, in general, improve among our
Hmm.
community, or maybe talk about more amongst our young children, to educate that? So I'm just going to kind of go a little bit into that.
Yeah. I think exactly what we're doing right now, what we're doing today is, I would like to think a step forward
Mhm.
and having those conversations, whether that's to your adult now, but your
Mhm.
child self,
Yeah.
in the past, whether that's someone experiencing what we're talking about right now. I think having those difficult conversations, and I just want to address also, um, it's easy for, I think, you and I, to an extent, right, to sit
Mhm.
across from each other like this virtually and talk about this almost lightheartedly, or almost like very easily, right, quote unquote
Mhm.
easily.
Yeah.
Um, but the idea, I have had many, many years, um, and many, many ups and downs,
Yeah.
in terms of processing what we're talking about. And so it's easier for me to communicate these things the way I am right now. But so I don't want to. What I'm saying is, I don't want that to come off as if, like, almost insincere or insensitive, like, oh, it's so
Mhm.
easy for her, or like they made me messy. People will
Mhm.
listen and it's like, oh, they made me messy. But like, I don't think some people will understand, and
Mhm.
some people will be like, oh, well, I went through that too, and we're
Mhm.
fine.
Mhm.
Like, not everyone who's experienced going to the mistress's house, or
Yeah.
having checkups on your dad or your mom, whoever was, you know unloyal and untrustworthy at that time, right? Not everyone is going to end up the way I ended up, right? Having one parent kill another parent.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, unfortunately, that's not uncommon in our Hmong community. We hear that so often. Um, and it's such a tragedy. It's so sad to hear that however many years it's been, like when I was 11 years old, right? I'm 32 right now. And those 20 plus years, and we are still hearing these murder homicide stories from Mona, and so I just want to address that first and foremost, saying how I think how weighty and how severe this conversation really is, despite us like, oh, nonchalantly, just like
As
this.
of right now, at this
Yes,
moment.
yes.
Yeah.
Like our previous conversation, I think we've had to process it through the first layer. This is the second layer of it, so it's a little bit easier to an extent. But I just want to say that. But yeah, so like what we're doing right now, I think is what we need to is what needs to happen, is having those conversations. We even mentioned too that um, we all kind of share our own personal story, right?
Yeah.
But we don't always hear other people talk about it. And then when one person reveals their story, everyone else kind of like flocks in a way. Like, oh my goodness, that was me too, or that was me too. But it's so sad
Well, I
that
didn't know that. I didn't know you went through that. Like, I
yeah,
know
I
the
know.
same thing, and that was what I think I was going through the other day, and I'm so glad that you mentioned that. I don't mean to interrupt you, but you're
No.
you're so right about this. Is that we're not nonchalantly talking about this because we know that this is an easy topic. It's because we have spent 20, 30 years. You're
Yeah.
32, I'm 42. We spent 20 plus, 30 plus years
Yeah.
to process this, to get in
Yeah.
a good space to have this conversation
Yeah.
today. And like you're right, is that some people turn out fine and okay. And there are some that didn't turn out okay, like in your situation where your mom took your dad's life and now she's in prison, or in my case where my parents, long story short, went through a series of I guess you could say kind of like divorce court in the Hmong culture of wanting to separate and marry the second wife. And it was so much turmoil and so much pain and so much sadness and depression. And um, I think we had shared about how like um, it doesn't always end up fine or okay, but it more often ends up really sad with a lot of mental health issues
Yeah.
and a lot of recovering and healing for many, many years. And like you and I had did the other day, we couldn't even process some of these things until I think sometimes we talk to each other.
Yeah.
And then we're like, oh, I don't feel so alone anymore. And I
Yeah.
think that's the main message tonight, is that you're not alone and you're not the only person going through this. And I love what you said about how we've shared a lot of our personal stories, but when we talk about it, people tend to flock to it. People begin to relate to it. And I think that's what we really want to offer everybody, is that there's moments in the Hmong community, in those Hmong meetings, that are not helpful.
Yeah.
But you can have a safe place and space to talk about it, like what we're doing today. Because I really want to highlight that back then, and I can relate to this, is that some of those meetings weren't helpful,
No.
and didn't make sense. And so I'm not here at all, though. Please forgive me, Hmong community and
Yeah.
ethnic communities.
We're
We're
not
not here at
bashing.
all. We're not bashing at all. We are here to really talk about the facts and reality
Yeah.
of what led to these tragedies and to some of the very sad and, if not bad outcomes, where let's say our families are disconnected, we're not really seeing eye to eye anymore, or we don't even know how to even really talk about it as a family sometimes. But with that said, I love, like what you said again, was having to take a moment to talk about this, to really talk about the details and what we went through, and to make sense of what was that trip for.
Yeah.
Why was I checking on dad's whereabouts, being
Right.
an 11, 12 years old kid. So how about let's talk about the education behind this. And you talked about the behaviors and the awkward things that happen. With our conversations now, what are some things that we can educate our community with, our kinds of situations that we can maybe reteach now?
Yeah.
Like warning signs and red flags that we can definitely, let's say, indicate that, oh, it's time to get professional or outside help.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
what do you think about that?
Yeah. I don't think I actually answered your other question fully
Oh,
either. So
it's okay.
I'm
Go
gonna
ahead. You
answer
go.
this.
Mhm.
I'm gonna answer this with that because I feel like they kind of go together, or the way that I have an answer for it kind of wraps it all together. I think you asked earlier, like, how can we educate a community, right? So it's kind of the same thing here. I think first and foremost, what I was talking about with like having these conversations right here, this is our this is a step forward into dismantling, right, the stigma that Hmong people still hold about mental health. Like,
Mhm.
and it's not even just Hmong people. There's lots of other cultures around the world that have this stigma about mental health. And I'm here to say that mental health is real. And it's kind of sad that I have to say that,
Mhm.
but mental health is very real and it does affect people. You know, we talked about this last time too. That mental health, it is more or less, it's the umbrella term for like, okay, we go through things, right? We have feelings. That's really what mental health is. Mental health concerns, mental health struggles is more or less like dealing with the hard stuff, right? So mental health itself is just what we're processing, what we're going through. Everybody has that. Um, but it's not always that easy. It's not
Mhm.
always, rainbows and sunshine and flowers. But mental health struggles like depression. Depression is real.
Mhm.
Um, and there are different forms of depression. Um, there are some forms of depression that are so biological that you do need, peer medication for. Um, I don't have an expertise in that. And then what I went through was more situational. So I'm not
Mhm.
going to dive into that, but I also want to acknowledge that that is a very important piece that I think, yeah, bây giờ món này tôi chuyên trang hạt tất cả tôi share, tất cả chị share is real, then I think it's even harder for us to believe that, oh, there's a chemical, understanding. There's a chemical,
Imbalance.
yes,
There, yeah,
imbalance and
there's a
explanation to that
yes,
depression. So
definitely.
yeah, so I think there's that. So I think one, mental health awareness is very important. So I was a part of Project Chandu. I'm not with it anymore. But I love the group. It's a nonprofit organization started in Minnesota here, but they hold virtual shows that really stream worldwide, like
Mhm.
globally, France,
Yeah.
everywhere. But their mission is to essentially prevent suicide,
Mhm.
by spreading mental health awareness specifically within our own community, and having those conversations because it needs to happen really because bây giờ mong biết cho ta.
Mhm.
So these things we don't biết cho ta about biết feelings anyway, so like even like this is even harder for us to reach, right? So we have to kind of start taking steps towards that. And so that goes to my second point, that's communication. We
Mhm.
have to learn to communicate, especially within the family,
Yes.
especially within the family, which is the topic that we're talking about. Like when it comes to um, homicide, things like this, that one one parent or one family member is doing something that is affecting everybody else. That is whether you know firsthand involved or just involved by relation.
Mhm.
Um, we need to have those conversations. And I think one piece that was missing, like again, I was so young, I didn't realize it then, but
Mhm.
I can reflect back to it now as an adult, where y'all meetings, shitana, that's in English, shitana.
Mhm.
No kid was informed. Like, I'm not saying, we have this way of talking, bit among people. Um, we've talked about this too, Rachel,
Mhm.
about like, oh, ning lao te ming sina,
Yes.
so we don't involve the kids. And I understand that. I understand the respect behind that. And a lot of times people hear my story, they approach me and they say, I'm so sorry about what happened. Hay te mà cái tế mình nói between cái này cái gì nữa, nếu để
Mhm.
mình nhỏ lo nhá hòn trong giáp, just because you guys are the kids and you have to be involved. So for me, that's a way of them saying you are not to blame. Don't blame yourself. You have no guilt to carry, right?
Mhm.
At the same time, I feel like it's almost dismissing
Yes.
that I am affected, right? And I think that's why we don't have these conversations. Like,
Yeah.
people say that as a good intention, right? But
Yeah.
then when we start to think about it that way only, and we try to solve a problem, then we continue to solve that problem thinking, okay, parties involved were mom and dad, and then that's it. But parties involved were mom and dad, but who does it affect? So it affects the kids. I mean, it affects them, but it affects the kids. And so my point is to have those conversations between parent or adult to child and say, how do you feel? Because our feelings are really negated in this situation.
Yes.
As it even like my mom's feelings are really negated in this situation. Your age, was mostly on the face, the front, it was like, oh, but to call right? But then after each meeting, every single time, they would go huddle into a bedroom, and like you could hear
In
the
private,
voices.
right?
Yes, in private.
It's in private, and it doesn't include the wife and or kids.
Yes.
And there are discussions that are
there. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I'm just really passionate about this.
No, go.
But they're encouraging. 이거 여자 욕했으면, 그쪽 어제는 왔다 했잖아, things like that. And that's very hurtful, right? Because you see polygamous relationships in the Hmong community, and we had this conversation, controversial, debatable, like some are happy, right? Quote unquote happy. Some have survived it. But I don't think most kids involved or families or spouses are truly like, oh yeah, gusa share with the husband. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way. And so one thing that my mom knew high, and it hurt me when I was a kid, but now that I'm older, I understood where she's coming from. She was like, cause nipa lote jaminyo high latina. And she was like, you guys didn't say anything to your dad. If you just voiced your opinion, and my dad was a softie. My dad loved us so much, really. But and the situation was like my relatives, their dad stopped the affair because the kids that approached. And so like that conversation, vice versa, right? I'm not just pointing fingers at the adults, but like the kids too. It's hard in the Hmong community to talk about these things, but what do you have to lose? Your awkwardness, your shame of saying I love you or I care for you, don't do this. Like there's nothing really to lose except the relationship, that this marriage that you see in front of you that's falling apart.
That's so true because excuse me. I remember having a conversation. It was 3 years after my dad had left to try to marry a second wife, and I remember, and this just popped in my mind right now. And I sat down with him when he was eating, and it was, I guess you could say, it wasn't a setting for both of us to be eating together. It was that he was eating by himself. And then I thought of this as a young 28-year-old at the time, 29-year-old, and I said, Dad, can I ask you a question? And he's like, what? And I said, because he spoke English, and I said, this might make you feel uncomfortable, but why did you leave 3 years ago to go live with another woman with the other kids? And I remember he was so shocked. He wasn't ready for that kind of question. Because I did ask him, and I think your mom has a good point, but also in general, this is not an easy topic to ask your own father, because some kids would get hurt, if you ask them to question your father. But luckily, my dad was very understanding, and he said, why do you ask me that? And I said, because I feel like we're your kids too, and we came first. Don't you love us? Don't you love mom, and being our dad and being here with us? And I think that kind of woke him up, that kind of like, I guess you could say, like, it was like a wake-up call, pretty much.
Yeah.
And he said, you have a good point, Rachel. I do love you guys, but sometimes, and he explained this helped me put some closure. He's like, but sometimes I feel like I want more. I want something different. And it was so awkward to hear that. But then I was again in my late 20s, and I go, sometimes that happens, where you love something so much, but you might want something different. And you might think, like they say, the cliche, the grass is greener on the other side. He didn't use that terminology or analogy, but he was like, I don't know, sometimes I just think like I could have a better, happier life. But that allowed him to express his true feelings, and also share with me that, but that's not because of you guys. It's not because of mom or you. It's because I feel that I wanted something more. So that was helpful. But again, that conversation is like once in a lifetime. I've never had that conversation again because it was so awkward. But that does help though. But again, like you said, the conversations about having extramarital relationships and or having these decisions that parents make with their children, it helps everybody process and understand where everyone's coming from, instead of, like you said earlier, dismissing or secretive conversations. Because when that happens, as you and I know, we start thinking about, even though people tell us it's not our fault, we're not supposed to be guilty about it. We do feel a sense of guilt about it because we think it's our fault. We eventually wonder, why did he go? Were we not good enough? So I think that's really important. I really agree with that, is that we need to work on our communications. And I think to some degree it is the parents' issues or marital like challenges. But like you said, it affects the kids. It really does. And just to have that open conversation so that we can finally move forward and say, you know what, sometimes people stop loving each other. Sometimes people want to, explore or have other relationships, and it's not accepted or it's not ideal, but these things happen. And I don't know. So like I said, it's not an easy conversation, but I just know that you mentioning that conversation, communication, excuse me, remind me of the conversation with my dad, that one time that I got to sit down with him. It was just a few minutes, but I finally empathized with him and I said, oh, I didn't know that you wanted something different and better. I didn't know that you were that unhappy. I didn't understand that. I thought you were happy. Because again, like you said, we don't talk about our feelings. We don't truly talk about that. But of course, my mom was not in the picture. I just think if my mom was there, it would have been a different conversation. But I think that's important. I think that's important for all of us to have an open conversation about what's happening in the family, how it's affecting everybody, especially about our feelings. So I just
want to say too, Rachel, I think that now that you say that, a lot of the times we are experiencing something, but we don't communicate that, right? And so we try to problem solve ourselves. Like, if your dad was truly unhappy with certain things within the marriage or within the family, like if he had communicated that earlier on, perhaps they could have worked on something, right? Like you think about that, but because then you hold this grudge or you hold this hurt, and then you start seeking something better on the other side to band-aid it or to take this pain away. And I'm not just talking about, the situation like extramarital affairs, but in general, I think we tend to do that. Like I might be feeling a certain way towards you, Rachel, and I never say it. And it could have just been a miscommunication, like, oh, Rachel, you looked at me weird and I thought you were mad at me, like just something like that. And then like I'm like, oh my goodness, Rachel is so rude to me and Rachel does this, and I like try to go find someone else to be a friend with, or it's just like something so small can start to become so big, but because we don't learn to communicate that. And like, oh, I even with my husband, that's how fights happen. A lot of times we're arguing about the same thing, or we agree the same thing, or it was just a stupid little miscommunication thing, but it has blown out of proportion, and that can really start to divide people. Because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 little moments like that
add up.
And I think that it goes back to my point of, if we just use our words and we communicate and like learn to love each other and learn to communicate, but also the person receiving it not to take offense right away either, That's what people are mostly scared about, right? I don't want to say it because that person is going to take it the wrong way, and then we're going to argue, and it's going to be really bad. So like this really goes for everyone involved, every party involved, that communicate, but also if you're on the receiving end, like be open-minded to it. Don't take offense to it right away. Try to understand first, and
I
then
love that you
react.
said that. Yes. No, I love that you said that because I'm in mental health for now over a decade, and I am a clinician social worker. So this is somewhat my expertise, but I do totally agree with that. Is sometimes it's just listening,
Right.
without that reaction and that emotion. It's just truly listening and understanding where that person's coming from without those judgments and emotions. It's a skill. It's absolutely a skill because our feelings are so raw and real and authentic to us. Right? It's right there in our heart. And so I totally agree with that. Is having an open mind to when you receive it is to first tell yourself, don't take it the wrong way, to just listen.
Right.
And we say to listen effectively, listen without judgments, being non-judgmental, giving that person an opportunity to freely share their thoughts, issues. And it doesn't mean, and this is interesting, just because somebody says, at this moment, I'm really mad at you, it doesn't mean divorce. It doesn't mean extreme. Or just because I disagree with you, it's not because I don't love or like you anymore. Sometimes it's just a matter of disagreeing with that particular situation. But I really love that you also said communicating, using your words, learning to love each other through it, learning to share each other's emotions and thoughts, and like you said, feeling some type of way and being free about it without feeling like you're going to be judged or you're going to be perceived differently, or like you say, you sometimes bitches are high because bitches are como they mean she can't. But not everything is argument. Sometimes things are just a conversation. Like you said, maybe kunje ko pike ko chili sa. Sometimes all it is just kada kala hai there. Oh, Rachel, nuni ina ucha e ko pokwe ko chi huku na yeah. And sometimes all it is just acknowledging that occurred. And then sometimes some people say, I've learned this too. Oh, I didn't even see you. I was totally preoccupied with something
That is
else.
so common.
Isn't it? Like, oh, I'm so sorry, my picture. I actually wasn't even paying attention. I was all up in my head because I was thinking about, like my meeting, or I was thinking about a crisis that occurred at work. But I'm so sorry, I ignored you. I didn't mean to. So you see how like that conversation, just that minute and a half or so, 2 minutes, clarifies that. And it doesn't build, like you said, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the 9 things. And by the time you have a conversation, it blows up. So I definitely agree that just having this an opportunity, or having this kind of opportunity to just authentically share what you truly think and feel, even though it might not always be accurate. I learned that a lot with being in this field, is that just because you feel somebody wronged you, it's not always the case that they were wrong. It's how you feel about it. It's your interpretation. So thank you so much for sharing that. I really, really appreciate it. And so I would like to continue with the conversation that you mentioned in your bio, that your parents' marriage began to deteriorate, and the hardship and pain caused your mother to take your dad's life. And of course, she tried to take her own life. So for young adults, individuals who are experiencing this, and don't know what to do or how to get help when you begin to see this deterioration and this hardship and pain, I know we kind of talked about it earlier, but what are like 3 major things that you noticed during that time also, that maybe it was time, like I said, to reach out, outside of the Hmong community? Because again, we both can conclude in our experience, and this is really our experience, it didn't help. So when do you think it was time, like, oh, I need to talk to a teacher, I need to talk to a counselor, or this is too hard, I don't know what's happening here, to prevent what had occurred, right, between the parents?
It's so interesting. It's like the things that happened, 유치빨이나, 유치빨 until you happen. And that's valid, right? It's like, it's not like I was stupid. It's not like it was right there and I didn't see it. These things don't happen, like they do happen, unfortunately, but they don't just happen. And it's not like, oh, A, B, C, D, it's not like consequential, or not consequential, sequential, as in like one goes into the other, goes to the other. But it can. I think before I jump into it, I want to first and foremost say I don't think, this is my personal opinion, I don't think it is ever too early to get help, because like a lot of times we're gonna wait till it gets really bad, wait till it gets really, really bad. Oh no, not yet. So I just want to acknowledge that first and kind of give permission to anyone that's listening. Like, it is never too early to seek help. And this goes back to mental health. Like, if you see someone depressed, if you see someone with potential suicidal ideation, even if you're not sure, but you just see it, it is not too early to seek help, to reach out to that person. And so I just want to say that. And so in terms of advice for anyone going through what I went through, I think acknowledge that if you are feeling that you need to seek help, then just do it. Because I think what I wanted to say was, if you yourself are internally conflicted, if you're confused, like, because that's what I felt. I wasn't feeling like, oh my goodness, something's going to happen today or tomorrow. There were maybe moments of me thinking that, but never thinking that it would actually bear fruit. It would actually happen, right? But there were a lot of moments where I was confused. I loved my dad. That was my role model. That was the person that I was going to grow up and be like. I know we talked about this in our previous conversation. Like, and everywhere I went, people knew whose daughter I was. Like, I look like my dad. It's like, foolproof. And I loved him too. I loved him so much because he was really the one that I felt like he was really the one that was pushing all of us, inspiring us to be the best person that we could be, to continue schooling, to go to higher education, to be this and to do that. And I never felt like, we always hear this within I feel like I'm digressing a little bit or diverging to a different topic, but there's a point. I promise. But I never felt, because we in the Hmong community, we always hear, or like in the Asian community, right? Like, our parents want us to be this and to be that, to be successful. And obviously my dad had that too, but I never felt that there was that push so that I could be the person that he wanted me to be in front of a crowd, right? I always felt it more like he loved me so much that he wanted the best for me. And in order for me to achieve those things, he knew what I had to do to get there. Like, that's the love that I felt from him. Yeah. And so that confusion of I love this man so much, and now I hate him. I think I hate him. Like, those feelings, those nuanced changes in you, I think those are things to look out for.
Yes.
And even if it's someone, and I would say, I love my friends, I love my peers, and there were some really good friends, like, when I got older, that really helped me. But in a situation like this, I would say seek out if you can, seek out an adult that you trust and that you feel like can understand you and not judge you, and just kind of take their time with you, whether that is to intervene or that is just to help you process.
Yes.
I don't know what I'm going through. I'm feeling this and I'm feeling that. And like have just talk about that. I think that would be very important.
Mhm.
Because as you're conversing with that person, they might see things as an adult that you might not see,
Mhm.
like, oh, hey, Pacher, you should really talk to this, or I would be careful, or, they might have eyes on you that you don't
Mhm.
realize that you need. Other things would be the obvious threats. I
Mhm.
hate to admit this too, but I remember waking up in the middle of the night
Mhm.
and my mom with a scissor in her hand,
Mm.
just threatening, go, or yeah, I remember my dad.
Mhm.
It is the way that big people talk, right?
Yeah.
We need to change that also. But
Yeah.
that's a personal opinion, but I think it is important. Like she was threatening to kill him, and he would say stuff like "Go hang there, okay," like
Oh,
things like
yes.
that. It's like
Yes.
okay, and it's like it goes back to mental health. With
Yeah.
someone that is talking about being suicidal, I feel like Hmong people in general they'd be like, "Oh, cái là hay sick, hay tiêu okay," it's
Oh,
like almost pushing you to do it, and it's not
provoking.
right. Yes,
Sometimes that for provoking, and I can totally relate to that because growing up, I heard a lot of that too. Now that you mentioned that is,
yeah,
like those words, right?
yeah,
Shit, what is it, that word?
yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah,
challenging,
yeah.
provoking, like,
Or they'll
oh
say
my
like,
God,
"Oh, cái này uất taoเลยà,"
yeah,
things like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Taunt you,
yeah,
provoking, but in a taunting way,
yes,
to prove yourself. I don't know.
yes, and that's definitely a subject that we definitely need to change the way that
Yeah,
we talk to each other, like you said, provoke each other, because given the situation like occurred with your parents, that taunting can only go so far. For those that
yes,
can take the taunting, as you and I know,
right,
you take it and then you leave, or you go and calm down and cool down. We know that's with people, right?
yeah,
But there are those that will get to a zone where they can't return. They go into a rage,
right,
they black out, and they just, of course, it becomes fatal. They hurt themselves or kill somebody else. And I
mhm,
think that's where you're so right about this, is that this confusion, misunderstanding, especially when you're a young kid and you wake up in the middle of the night, when you're
mm,
hearing all of these um, arguing
right,
about
yeah,
challenging, right, provoking, taunting, those are definitely um, indicators
yeah,
that, okay, it could get serious, because those can lead to, like what's happened in your life, where it can lead to something fatal and very tragic. And so we need to definitely work on that, learning more about communicating better, but also going to, like you said, a trusted adult that can
mhm,
truly listen and know that, okay, um, it's not okay for parents to taunt, provoke, or adults to do this in front of the kids, because it is damaging to the kids as
yeah,
well. So I definitely hear that, and I think that's really important, because those are some major things. I think as a young child, like you said, initially just feeling confused, and you brought up that good point about how much you love and adored your father, and then when all these things were happening, you
mhm,
didn't know if you needed or wanted to hate him,
right,
because I felt the same way as a young
mhm,
adult, even in my 20s. Like, I was like,
mhm,
so do I forgive my dad
right, right,
and love him again and take him back,
yeah,
even though he hurt us, or even
right,
though he didn't really want to be with us? And that really does, like you said, contribute to our mental health, the way we
mhm,
think and feel about ourselves and how we see the world.
mhm,
And especially, like you said, when you're a young child, you don't have that capacity. Nobody has capacity at 10, 11, 12 years old
yeah,
to be like, oh, don't know what though, because
right, right, right,
no, really not.
no,
You're just like, oh, why is that happening? So
right,
definitely, so I want to just wrap that up real quick, is that when you're hearing yourself be confused and not understanding the situation, you are questioning, um, your understanding or love for your parents, because of the situations that are changing, the dynamics are changing, and you're waking up to a lot of yelling and provoking and taunting, and you're confused as to how to manage that, because again, it's common, it's the
yeah,
norm,
yeah,
and it definitely is. It shouldn't be a norm. to be
Yeah.
taunting and provoking that, and to always be confused and to question yourself whether you should or shouldn't be loving your parents anymore because of these kind of situations. So thank you so much for going in depth into that. So I think another thing too is I just want to reemphasize that if anybody is having any mental health serious concerns and or just questions, please make sure that you reach out to your local mental health agencies, mobile crisis units, teachers, college administrators. We also have 1-800 numbers that we can give, and we'll put at the end of this. Go to the ER, go to the your local primary care physician, and talk to them about it. And I think right now, for example, like Kaiser, there's a standard now that they ask you, are you feeling safe at home? Do you feel that you're able to go home and live at home and be safe? And those are really important questions now. And it only takes us just one question to make sure that, this person feels okay, especially when they're just doing like getting their vitals and they are with somebody who they possibly could feel safe with, even if it's a stranger.
Right.
But medical professionals. So I want to remind everybody that there are people out there who can provide counseling and support and help you understand and process. Not fix everything, right? Like the Band-Aid.
Right. Yes.
But at least give some understanding and processing. But I'm also going to disclose this as a disclaimer. I know that being in mental health, being a bilingual counselor, a lot of Hmong parents and parents don't want to share or say anything because on CPS get involved. But what I've learned now being a mental health professional is that most of the time CPS workers don't want to break up the family.
Yeah, no,
They
they don't.
actually want to intervene and provide for the counseling support with their culture, right? With their culture and language. And I think that's, I think a huge part of this now being in America and US is that we have the, I guess you could say the advantage, if not so much the advantage, but we have the capacity now to have people in our own community to help interpret and translate and process. Versus before when we were growing up where we didn't really have a lot of mental health professionals. So I really do hope that everybody and anybody who's listening to this knows that there are those of us who are now in our, like 30s and 40s and 50s who's been through it and now coming back to help others. So with that said, you also mentioned.
I want to
Go ahead.
interject really quickly, Rachel. Maybe I mean, you could add this to the list of resources at the end too, but I know that because I work with Project Chandu, I'm not trying to market for them right now, but they are very important in the topic that we're talking about. Project Chandu, I think their website is just projectchandu.com. They have, if you search through their website, they have a page where they list resources that are Hmong or Hmong speaking, because I do understand that there's that cultural aspect and that language aspect that they do Laona especially, I think they don't feel comfortable, or they maybe even distrust the system, if there's a system, and so they will feel more comfortable going to a Hmong professional. And so I don't recall if they have just Minnesota. I think they were working. I think they for sure have Minnesota and Wisconsin, but I think they were working on outside other resources. And so if you're more, they do professionals that live outside of Minnesota to reach out to them and say, hey, we have this and that in this location. We would love to add that. I'm not part of them anymore, but they would love to add that to that group, so that Mona, we have a place to go, like a hub. Say, hey, go here. Here's all the list of resources, and I think they put the phone number, the clinic, kind of maybe even what that specializes in, things like that. So really look into that. And thank you for mentioning what you mentioned, Rachel, because that's very important, I think.
Yes, and I really like that you said there's a list of resources now on, and again, we're not intentionally trying to advertise, but you're right, is that we do need a list of resources that is culturally and language sensitive, regardless of what cultural background you're from. Like you said, Project Chandu, we can definitely put the links, at the end of our discussion interview. and so that you can go onto the website and you can go and look for the resources, because nowadays, like you said, is that the Midwest has definitely come up with a lot of Minnesota, Wisconsin resources, and I think California is a little bit behind, but I think we're working on creating more resources too.
I know we are.
Like it's slowly but surely, right?
Yeah.
But I definitely want to say, here in Sacramento, we have Asian Pacific Community Counseling, which I had worked for a few years ago, that definitely talks about mental health, and also has 13 to like even 16 Asian languages that, that can support Southeast Asians and Asians when they're going through mental health concerns. And it is very confidential. And just so that people know is that mental health professional to it's HIPAA, right? And so that was one of the best things that we can share with a lot of our clients was, we have no right to share your story and your information out there. We value your stories, and we want to help you in private, right? In confidence, in confidence or in confidentiality. So, I want to emphasize that is that there are rules and laws to protect those that want to come forward and talk about these issues. As sensitive as this. And then also we have obligations, to make reports and everything, but our intention is to support, right? To provide resources and support. So, but thank you so much for mentioning that. So I also wanted to touch a little bit about, before, we continue the conversation, is you mentioned that there was a dark depression phase that you had gone through in your bio for a really long time, from the end of your elementary years all the way to your second year of college. And that's a long time span, because the end of elementary is 6th grade, right? 10, 11 years old, all the way until you're in second year of college. And as I recall, you're like 20, 21 years old. And that's a long, long span. So with that said, if you don't mind, we can discuss, sometimes people just feel sad and blue for a few days or a few weeks, but when it lasts over a period of a decade, if we can talk a little bit more about what does that dark phase look like, because that is also, I think, important for people to know. Because I think you and I, we talked about the other day that being sharing with us for even over a decade, right? Even now being 42, like I've carried a lot of this stuff for the past 30 years. And it's not just the blues that you could shake off. So what was it like for you just during that time?
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy, first of all, to say 10 years, and then you're like 30 years, and I was like, whoa. So,
no comparison. You don't have to
no comparison, but like, just, it's so hard to fathom. Even when I thought about it and I did the math, like when I first did the math, I was like, no, that can't be. Like, that's just ridiculous. Like, that's not even possible, right? And then I mean, I'm not great at math or anything, but I'm pretty sure from 11 to 20 years old, that's a lot of years to live in depression. And it is kind of weird to think about, because even now I think about it and I'm like, dang. First it's sad. But then it's like I just said, it's unfathomable. Like, how is that possible? And the way I guess I could explain it is, it's not like it's always constant. I think people think about, oh, that's impossible because you can't possibly be sad 24 hours every single day for, over many years. And that's not also to say that what I'm feeling was not what I was feeling, but it was never gone. Like, people who are depressed and who are depressed for a very long time can be very good at masking it, right?
Yes.
I could be so depressed and be like laughing. I could be depressed right now and you wouldn't even know it. I did this activity with my monk students. I was a part of Minnesota Jeja. We did a monk camp. So it was 2 weeks, and I was the mental health and writing artist teacher. And I did this with fourth graders. I did this with middle schoolers. I did this with high schoolers and a few college students. And across the board, everyone got it wrong. I handed them a bunch of pictures, right? A variety of emotions. I handed them a bunch of pictures. There were kids, there were adults, there were male, female, laughing, sad, in a corner, all the emotions you can think of. And I said, group this into people who you think are depressed and people who you think are not depressed or sad and not sad, right? And of course, they put all the happy people in one group and all the unhappy people in a group from what they could tell. And then I said, I didn't say they're right or wrong. I just said, okay, here's what I would say. I collected all the pictures. You know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
I collected all the pictures and I held them each up one by one. I said, I think this person is depressed or could be depressed, right? This person could be depressed. This person could be depressed. And I go through, of course, you're intentionally doing it. So I go to the happy people first, and I was like, oh yeah, I got it right. Yes. I was excited, and then I get to like the ones that they were kind of confused, and they're like, oh man, I see, I told you. They go back and forth with their friends, and then I go through the sad people, and they're like, what? Like they get confused, and then by the end of it, they're like, oh, like without even saying anything, everybody understood, right? Yes. And the lesson that obviously is you can't always tell. And so that's the point. When people who are depressed for however many years, I say bouts of it because I can't say, I can't claim 24 hours a day every single day for 10 years. But it was definitely in and out, in and out. There were moments where I was happier, not necessarily happy, but happier. And there were moments where I was like, I remember, because sometimes I think to myself, I can't possibly have been sad for those many years. And I think about specific moments, from when I was 14 and 11 and 16 and 17. And I have distinct memories of, I remember in high school for a very long time, every single night. I can't believe I'm saying this out loud. I guess I shared it in my poem, but every single night, praying that I would not wake up, right? And then waking up in the morning, so disappointed that I was still able to wake up. Like just every day. But I would go through the motions. I would go to school, I get dressed, I hang out with my friends, I play soccer, I did, after school activities, I was the co-president, I was the president, I was secretary, I had all these roles. I had good grades, I was the student that everyone was like, oh my goodness, look at her, look at this, and it wasn't like I was super smart or anything. I just worked really hard. But that was my life. Like that's how depression looked like for me. Yeah. I could still do these things and still be depressed. And then the obvious, habits or obvious, I guess, ways that could have been detected, I guess you could say, I had somewhat of like a bipolar personality. I would be very happy and then also be very cold. I would be, I would share with people. And then once I felt like I shared too much, I would start to close myself off and build all these walls that I could because nobody could get through me. One, I realized was because I felt like I didn't deserve, right? I didn't deserve to be loved. I couldn't go there because nobody really showed me after that good childhood that I had. Nobody showed me how it was to be loved and that I should be loved and that I needed to be loved. And so I felt like I was undeserving of it. And then I think a part of it also was there are times where I would be happy and then I would guilt myself into not being happy because the obvious reason for me was my dad died, right? My mom's in jail. What do I have to be happy about? How can I possibly be happy? I can't be happy. And then the moment where I started realizing I was forgetting my dad's face, even in my memory, I was forgetting his face. I was forgetting his voice, and I was forgetting his smell, his scent. And that tore me up because when I was younger, I knew, right? I knew I was never going to forget that face. The man that I loved, the man that I adored, and everything that he did, I just knew that I would live with with that, very distinct memory of him forever. And I started to lose it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very normal to lose it.
Mm-hmm.
When someone is in your life for so long and then someone is not in your life for so long, it's very normal to forget certain things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I felt so bad. I
Mm.
mean, in simple terms, I felt so bad. How
Yeah.
could you possibly forget? And so I would like put myself back into that place. And I would just think about his name and think about his face and think about his smell. And I would like guilt trip myself into not being happy and to be miserable, because how can I possibly be happy when he's not even here anymore?
Mm-hmm.
When he died such a tragic death, you know?
Yeah.
So I mean, that kind of explains a little bit more what my depression looked like and about how
Yeah.
I kept myself in depression, right?
Yeah.
But yeah,
No,
I could
that's
go on forever, 10
no,
years.
no, no, no. That is so important for everybody to know. And I love just going back to what you had shared about the example, and I just want to come back around to how it looked like for you. And you're absolutely right about this. Is that there are different ways that people mask depression, and
Mhm.
there are also ways that people live through depression and
Right.
just really show the affect of depression.
Yeah.
But I think the most important thing is that when you do that exercise, um, people associate depression with just people feeling looking sad,
Yeah.
and not people who are actually smiling and involved in, like you said, clubs and being present, being active. And I think that I can relate to that too, because I'm a very social, very active
Mm.
person. And people who were like, it's impossible for you to have depression, Rachel.
Yeah.
It's impossible for you to have anxiety when you
Mm.
sing or you do so many things outside of your box. And I said, because you have to learn to live outside of that box.
Yeah.
You have to force yourself and create skills to go outside of that, so you don't, like you said, go into that phase and that dark
Mhm.
zone. But I really like also when you said that you had distinct memories waking up every day and
Mm.
were sad and just be like, oh my gosh, I have to do this again. Because I woke up every day
Yeah.
for a really, really long time in my life where I would just say, not again. I
Yeah.
have to do this again. And that's what
Yeah.
depression looks like.
Yeah.
And I definitely had to do a lot of, if for those of you who don't know, therapy, but we had to do a lot of cognitive therapy, behavioral therapy, and a lot of DBT therapy to change that mindset, to change what you said to yourself every day, right?
Mm.
Counteracting those with positive affirmations, and for positive things. And I remember, what if I just said to this morning, I woke up, not even saying, oh my gosh, I'm up again, and just saying, I woke up, I'm up.
Mhm.
So I had to do that over, like I was sharing with you, over a period of 20 years,
Yeah.
almost 30 years, is learning to wake up and not um, feeding the fire of that depression feeling
Mm. Mhm.
and
Mhm.
saying, shit, I'm up again.
Yeah.
Oh, I have to do this again,
Yeah.
again. And then learning to say, I'm up. Okay. I don't feel always great, but I'm up and I'm going to go do something. So also, I definitely can relate to where there's times when we can definitely share so much with
Mhm.
everybody in the world. And then we built walls to
Mhm.
also close people off. And I definitely can say, and my siblings know this, my family knows this, that I'm very guilty of that. And I mean, guilty is because they never understood why I did that. But I think you
Mm.
really touched on this, um, where I'm like, oh, it got, it really hits me here, is that I truly thought for a long time in my life I didn't deserve to be loved because nobody really showed me. Nobody ever told me.
Right.
Nobody ever felt or taught us how to feel love, and how to truly be happy. And like you said, the moment I felt happy, every moment I could remember feeling happy, I guilted myself to
Yeah.
not feeling happy. And like you said, you would just go back and say, how can I be happy if, and I think in my case,
Yeah.
people know, you said you forgot your dad's face, and I think of it like, how can it be happy if I was given away when I was a kid to
Mm.
be adopted? How can anybody feel happy about that? And
Right.
you
Right.
begin to think that black and white thinking, and you convince yourself that you don't deserve it. And so it's so important for people to know in this journey, in this depression phase, that there are moments when we do forget, and it's normal. It doesn't mean that we're any worse of a person,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that sometimes, like you said, it's just normal to lose it and to not remember, or to feel like you forget things. It happens. It's just time, right? With time.
Mhm. Mhm.
So instead of guilting yourself to go into that cycle, as we call it, right, and then that dark phase, it's just acknowledging it. I'm learning to be mindful with it, learning to just acknowledge it, honor it, respect it, and then learning to be okay that sometimes we do forget. Giving yourself permission to forgive yourself, that you're not always going to be happy. But like you said, depression isn't always constant and consistent.
Yeah.
There's days, like you said, cycles, where there's okay days, where I call them like those days where I have a little, I think of a little straw, where I'm breathing through the straw and I'm still
Mm.
underwater, but I'm still breathing. So as
Yeah.
long as I'm still breathing, I'm still going.
Yeah.
It's not that I feel any better, but it's that at least I'm still doing the clockwork things that I do, the routine.
Mhm.
But that also helps with depression, I've learned, is that routine.
Yeah.
And so I've learned that too. And I really, like I said, admire that you shared that decade of depression, and that you shared about how, there's moments where you feel it very intensely,
Mhm.
and that's normal. And there's some days where you don't feel it as much.
Mhm.
And I can definitely relate to that, having depression myself. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, because we go through phases and cycles. And like you said, sometimes it's situational, sometimes certain smells, music, things can
Yeah.
trigger us.
Yeah.
But also, as much as what I've learned is we can get ourselves into that deep depression, we can learn to also, I call it crawling out of it,
Yeah.
by learning how to just acknowledge it, respect it, honor it, and also say, you know what, I may feel horrible today, but I'm not going to sit in my misery today.
Yeah.
I'm going to actually just go walking. I'm just going to watch K-drama, or I'm going to do
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
else
Yeah.
outside of my emotions, because it's not all of what I am and who I am
Mhm.
today. It's just how I feel. And I noticed that. I noticed that with depression, when it becomes serious, is when I think you and I, we can relate to this, is that sometimes we can't shake it, but we have to learn skills to overcome it.
Yeah.
Um, and we have to live with the depression. So, but I think that's just really powerful, is that you especially when you share again that depression looks different for everyone. It's no
Mhm.
one, um, you
One
know,
size fits
one
all.
size all. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not always crying every day and
No. No.
yelling and
Yeah.
screaming and withdrawing and isolative. Sometimes it's just, even when in the middle of, like, some of my clients have told me that I've been in the middle of a party at New Year's,
Mm.
right, and I feel sad and I feel depressed and I don't know
Mhm.
what comes over me, but I just don't feel like I'm supposed to be there. And that's sometimes part of what depression is that it just overwhelms you and your body feels
Mhm.
that way. So I also want to, though, emphasize on, and moving to the next part to this, is that
Mhm.
you started to develop coping skills and
Mm.
ways to have an outlet.
Yeah.
And please share with the audience of how you started to open up, be proactive with moving on, and knowing, acknowledging. I love what you said this in your bio, was depression never left you. And that's important for people to know. And I think sometimes, when I would educate some of my Hmong clients, I said, sometimes you mo get you shana, get you
Mhm.
shana ni chia you not chua get you zhong, or you the
Mm.
ta get you plan na.
Mm.
Sometimes
Mhm.
ni plan ni yon na ya. It's a
Mhm.
part of, like, I think of it like
Mhm.
a scar. It's there with you.
Yeah.
How did you start to cope and start to get through it and see that light?
Yeah. So I'm gonna go back and talk about how Mong she thả right?
Yeah,
We don't talk about our feelings, especially bây giờ you she thả mà. But bây giờ family na bây giờ she
yeah,
thả. Especially things that matter like this. Things that it is our family that we should be talking
yeah.
to about these things. And I admit, like my siblings and I, we still don't really talk about these things.
Mhm.
My sister and I, the only other daughter, the only Alton so we've grown to have a strong relationship, and there are things that we confide into each other, but I think there's still things that you kind of still share.
Yes.
Um, but with that said, so I didn't none of us really communicated to each other what we were dealing with. I
Mm-hmm.
think we could, and we still can see certain things, tipo, personality, attitude, like, and we can assume that that might be what it is, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that might be this, that might be that, or he or she's still holding on to this and that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but so with that said, and I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but I'm the youngest of seven,
Mm-hmm.
and having to go through what we went through, being the being 11 but also being the youngest, there are a lot of things that I think I was sheltered from, I was protected from, um, and things that I was not involved with, like the funeral things, the
Yes.
preparations, the because I had my dad passing, but I also had my mom going to court, and going to prison. So like
Mm-hmm.
the lawyer part of that too, hiring a lawyer,
Yeah.
going to these court appearances, and I showed up, but like the behind the scenes I did not know of. Um, or I knew of, but I didn't know about, right, in detail. So a lot of how I coped was by myself, as with every other sibling, they coped by themselves. But the way I did it was I used writing as my
Mm-hmm.
coping mechanism. Not like on purpose, like I don't know what to do, so I'm going to do this. It just kind of came naturally. I always liked writing. I always liked books.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I guess I didn't even realize that I did like those things. But
Mm-hmm.
I just always remember writing a lot and copying library books because I knew how to return the books and I couldn't have them. So I'd like copy some of the books that I really liked.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and writing turned into journaling. And when I was younger, I really wanted to be like a singer songwriter. So I would write, I would try to write lyrics to songs and things like that. And then naturally, I came into poetry. I was
Mm-hmm.
introduced to spoken word, and I was like, well, that's kind of a mix between both worlds of poetry, writing, and singing. I
Yeah.
can share out loud, my poems. So I did that, and it wasn't until I was in college that, and I did that consistently. I did that
Mm-hmm.
throughout my whole life, really, from when I was 11 years old. I mean, even before that, but all the way to even now, I still do. But it wasn't until I was in college that I shared with a friend, and she was like, "You should, you should share your stuff."
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, no, and so she encouraged me to share. So I shared some of my poems out loud in like shows and showcases, performances, and things like that. And then I also pursued a degree in English because of
Mm-hmm.
her. I took writing classes, took literature classes, and um, I don't think I would share any of my stuff today if it wasn't for her that pushed me, you
Mm-hmm.
know and to do what I do now. And it was such a second nature to me, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that I could do anything with it. It was just it was really just a coping mechanism for me. But I understand the power of it now. I know we
Mm-hmm.
talked about this too, Rachel.
Yeah.
It's just like I'm just a writer, I just write poems. Like to anyone, and especially the Hmong community, I feel like nobody understands or probably will appreciate or like see this as like a high achieving, thing.
Mm-hmm.
But during the work that I've been doing and working with the people that I've been working, I see it. Like I'm
Yeah.
starting to see it more and more,
I
and
was
I'm like,
gonna say you have to see it
wow.
because I discovered you through browsing, like I was telling you, browsing through
Yeah.
YouTube and with spoken words, and
Mm,
that's how powerful it was.
mm.
Was that I saw the YouTube videos, I saw you in Project Chandu, and I was like, oh my gosh, I've always dreamt of doing this myself, but I was
Oh,
brave enough to do it. And I took similar route, like pursuing music. And so,
yeah,
but I've always, like, I think we talked about the other day, is that
yeah,
I journaled and I wrote too. But
yeah.
then, most of the people in my life that wanted to encourage
Mm,
me to have an outlet was through the music. So I definitely love that you shared that you had somebody to push you
yeah,
to explore all your writing and share it and do showcases and stuff, even though it was just so natural and it was just something you loved and liked. And then you discovered like it was, something so powerful. Because that's how I met you. I was like, hey, I'm gonna reach out to her. I'm gonna find her on
Yeah.
Facebook. I'm not a stalker, y'all. So, but I saw that and I was like, I definitely would love to interview her and have her share her story, because we don't have enough young people or people in our community to really truly share their journey, and if not their pain, but they're just their story. And we don't, like we were saying, this whole time, is that we 被变成差异去谈 something
Yeah.
these kind of issues, because it's so sensitive, it's so
Yeah.
hard. But then I go, this is the right time,
Yeah.
because remember I was telling you the other day, it's like I wanted someone like you
Mm-hmm.
3 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I finally realized, like we were talking a little bit about the universe and God and stuff, and I said, you know what? I know in God's time, in due time, that this will happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even though it's a couple of years, 3 years later, 2, 3 years later. But I go, you know what? I'm so glad, because we spoke it into the universe, just like we wrote it into the universe,
Yeah.
and it's bringing us together. So I really truly admire that you went with the writing, the love of writing, the love of books, and sharing this and trusting your friend and showcasing your work.
Right, yeah. It's really her. All of this is her.
You're like, oh, I didn't even know that it would touch these many lives, and that it could change people's lives, but it really does. And that's part of this whole journey, is that sometimes we don't even realize that all the things that we go through is supposed to help other people. It's supposed to reach out to them and connect people and help people get through these hardships. So, excuse me. With that said, so if you have a poem or something, I would love for you to share that with us. Exclusive. So I was like, please prepare something for us. Because definitely, I want people to know that, we still do these things every day, right? And think about these things. And it's not just in our past, but even till this day, like you and I were talking, we still go through things and write things.
Yeah.
So, do you have something you can share with us tonight?
Yes, I do. I went back and forth a lot. I know.
It's okay. No worries.
It's not exactly just exclusive, but
it's okay.
I'm gonna try to charge my phone actually.
Yes, no worries.
Because I was not expecting to use my phone for this. We had some technical difficulties, so I had to. Oh, actually, I don't think I can because. All right, that's fine. But I just finished writing this piece this month, and I just performed it for the first time. Well, shared it actually for the first time last week. I was asked to write and perform a piece for Minnesota Hmong educators. And I am somewhat of an educator myself, although not licensed. And prior to the show, I was a writing teacher for Hmong students at a high school for a week. And there was so much vulnerability there. There was so much rawness that like brought me back to me as a high schooler. I always say, "Tono, you lao, you bit your to show," and like you can look back and like you can kind of see, oh man, like that was nothing, like we were just kids. But when you're in the thick of it, when you're that young, like everything you feel is so strong. And I think that is very, very valid, right? But you forget. The point that I'm saying is just that you forget. You forget that once upon a time you felt like that. Once upon a time you carried those anxieties, those worries, that feeling of maybe not enough, whether that's amongst your peers or your friends. And or your peers or your family. And there were some really intense emotions and situations that these Hmong students were going through that I really felt for them, you know? Even as an adult now, like I couldn't imagine being in those shoes and carrying the weight that they were carrying. And so this poem that I'm going to share really is from that space of thinking our Hmong educators that là chi or you know sipunai ku là có thể cho mình nhỏ sư but hay chính mà là ôn nào gì nè,
Yes.
you know, they are our students are our kids school counselors when they're not, you know. There are their counselors, there are their parents, there are their friends and mentors, and they wear so many hats, and the point is to highlight them but also to emphasize that bây giờ tương thầy và mong they need a lot of love and care.
They
And
do.
yeah, bây giờ nè thích gì nè, to love on them the way that, you know, we didn't get.
Yes.
Or that if you did, then pass it along. But if you didn't, you know, fix that, correct that.
Yes.
So I know it's kind of a long introduction, but I will.
No, that's great. I love it. I love it. That's so true. I was just thinking some of the people that made the biggest impacts in my life were my teachers and counselors. And like you said, we wear so many hats. We're not only just educators, but we're also sometimes parents, counselors, mentors, and even an older, like an auntie or something older.
Yeah.
We wear so many different roles when we're educating, you know, our community, and we are part of that growth with them. So thank you. Yes.
Yes, of course. So I just want to say also, there's a little bit of singing here. The singing actually comes from a song, so I don't want to take full credit for this.
Yeah.
And then the title is George Yotai. That's actually a borrowed phrase also from another Hmong poet and writer, Nilambeho or Ba Mo. I think he recently passed, but just want to give credit where it's due.
Yes.
All right. There's a world outside my door. I don't know it anymore. I'm gonna stay here now. I'm gonna stay here now. Close the curtains, cut the lights. Match the darkness to my mind. It's gonna break me down. It's gonna break me down. Clutch it out, clutch it your. Lundu tine chakuche. Kunyo chandu ni. Janyo chandu ni. You love the way mothers do. Hold the way fathers do. You pluck the stars and hand feed the mouths of academic hunger starved for a little while. You hold the stardust glimmer of hope at your fingertips. You hold the vowels, hold them long, hold them short, hold them slow. You draw the lines, draw the curves, dot the I's and cross the T's. You leave no work undone. Ole, Shinzi, 说一二杯老鸡就像一座高冰罩，够个男孩子。You hold gravity. On your shoulders, like a learned muscle, you write lessons into the night. You toss and turn, you churn and rage, you sober, slow, restless, and awake. You lift the apostrophes and lay the commas. You dance quotations around a beautiful phrase. You remind to annotate and build essayists. You paint landscapes from astrophysics to the silkworms of China, to the Great Sphinx of Giza, to French words, American history, and the Secret War. You raise children out of Blongzhou, Panda, and Ate. It is tumultuous work that you do, deafening, rewarding, a challenge. Ring Zhao, you know a child better than their parents do. You know how their earthquakes, a family breaking, a parent's divorce, a young child's heartache, hidden from within the ribcage of a hummingbird's wings, the cadenced chorus arriving at its debut. Boku, Jana, Chatzi, Delusion. You lead children to the high noon, saying, see how the sun shines for you. But like Homer's Odyssey and the tragedy of Hamlet, it is not easy be. From your back pockets, take out brush and paint. Lift fresco into the afternoon light. From the walls of your mouth, from Daedong to school hallways, you are unfailing love. You unwavering Pengyu. Katapao luningon joy, Tanye. Accustomed to this unaccustomed earth. You outstretch arms toward a young child's stuttering voice. You offer the world. Dancing in big and boisterous loud arms, you are amazing. You love the way mothers do. Hold the way fathers do. You pluck the stars and hand feed the mouths of academic hunger, starved for a little while. You hold a stardust glimmer of hope at your fingertips. And now I know there's a world outside my door. I forced my feet down to the floor. I'm gonna make it out. I'm gonna make it out. Take a breath and say a prayer. Find strength in my despair. It's not gonna take me down. It's not gonna take me down. That's it.
Wow, that was wonderful. I love it. Oh, it makes me so emotional.
Thank you, Rachel.
I
Thank
love
you.
how you incorporated the lyrics, music with spoken words. Oh my God, it was so beautiful,
Oh, thank you.
emotional. Oh my goodness. Um, oh my gosh, that was so beautiful. It's just amazing what you do. I think that you are truly a gift to this world, and what you've been through has definitely, for at least I will speak for me, has definitely been a light. Um, just to experience that, I was just like, wow. Like I said, in my mind, I've been waiting for you. I've been waiting for you for so long, but that's where I feel like I'm more free now because I have so much performance anxiety, and when I watched you, it was so natural. Like you said, it's a part of you, and you definitely reminding me that what we love and what we've been through is a part of who we are, and you own it, and that's fantastic because now we get to share with the world to let people know that you can share your experiences through music, through spoken words, through poetry, through something that came authentically, like in your case, from you, from all this pain, right? And um, oh my gosh, I'm like, I'm gonna go back and just rewatch this. But I feel so honored. I feel so privileged and so honored, and I'm so touched.
I feel so privileged.
Oh my gosh. I never imagined in a million years that this platform would bring me to this point where I'm meeting individuals like yourself who have turned your life, into poetry, into music, and to truly live it and do it as an educator, do it as, like you said, as a mentor, as a counselor, et cetera, all the hats, it's just what we really, really need now is to have role models like you. And thank goodness that you are doing this, because now it's allowing us to, follow in your footsteps or walk with you even, so I am so grateful to be a part of this journey of path, with you. Um, Thank you so much. So the
Yeah,
last couple
vice
of things.
versa, Rachel. I know,
What?
I don't want
Yeah.
to interrupt your line of thought right now, but
Yeah.
I feel completely the same way, vice versa. It is so humbling for me to be invited, on platforms like this to share my story. Because, like I said, who am I? Just a person who writes it in my room, And then all of a sudden, people want to hear and people want to talk to me, and I just share my story, and it is. I have to remind myself at the same time, because sometimes you feel like, I don't want to be in this space because, like, who am I, to be in
Mhm.
this space with people like you. But what I think kind of pushes me is that I every time I do this, people come up to me and do relate, and it's like, and you said, you know, I think you said something about you walking this journey with me, and I feel the same way back. And I feel like
Yeah.
people who hear and are touched by what I do, if they are, I feel like I get to walk this journey with them, to that they are not alone, and that together we can kind of get through this, whatever it is that they may be going through, how similar or different it is from my journey. But I think that pain and that hurt comes from such a familiar place, actually,
Mhm.
that we can still connect on that level.
Mhm.
Um, and so I just want to say, I know you're giving a lot of, like, kind words and humbling words, and I feel the exact same way, vice versa. So I applaud you for what you are doing, and that you are allowing people, um, from all walks of life to share this platform with you and share their story. So thank
Oh,
you. Thank you.
it's like I said, it's such an honor. And I didn't mention thank you for that too. Thank you for all the love and kindness that you've shared, and the courage, and just so much. Um, I mean, just so much things that you just shared that just finally it helped me process a lot of things I've been questioning all my life. But I forgot to mention this with you in our other conversation. But I really started this because I was at a very dark,
Hmm.
depressed stage in my life. I had lost so many things, and I didn't know how to get out of it. And I remember there was a counselor that reminded me when I was in my 20s, when I was also in another dark phase. And he said to me, sometimes you have to work on something above and bigger than yourself,
Hmm.
and it will help you understand the
Wow.
smaller pieces
Yeah.
to this whole thing called life.
Yeah.
Because if you work on a larger, even though it's out of your comfort zone, if you work on a larger purpose, on a larger cause, you're gonna find that we're all connected in so many ways. And it stuck with me for 20, 30 years now,
Yeah.
because I always felt like I would crawl into this hole or into a rock or something, and I'd be like, life isn't worth living anymore because, and I will always find a reason. And then he said, well, what if you, and I have this on my board in my bedroom next to my bed every day I read it, is it's a Bob Marley quote, but love the life that you live a life that you love. And I was like, okay, I can do that.
Hmm.
If I just love the life I live and live a life that I love, then perhaps I won't be, so depressed. I can still feel depression, but I
Yeah.
won't be so trapped in it. And definitely this journey with this project was part of that journey, was to have an outlet, like you said, with the poetry, the singing, is to say, let's hear stories of real life struggles and hardships, but let's also hear how they overcame it. What did
Yeah.
they do um, to still continue with their passions and their dreams? Because I was at a halt in that part of my life too. And, it was during COVID. But I also like to dedicate this whole platform, as I've said from the beginning, to my son, and to the next generation is to know that we want to create this safe space for everyone, you know, and to our children, so they know that, you know, there is a place, not just on Facebook and social media, you know, but also there's still like between people, you know, that there's conversations and places that we can talk outside of this, which we have, to share and to process these experiences. So we can try to make sense of some things, because some things don't make sense in life, you know. But thank you. And in closing, I would love for you to share perhaps maybe an important lesson and or an inspiring, encouraging message to those out there who have gone through similar situations like we have, whether it's family hardships, deaths, suicidal thoughts, or homicidal situations, depression. If you can share, you know, a message to them, to our audience, so that they know there's still hope out there, that'd be wonderful.
Right. Oh, there's a lot. I feel like there's a lot that I want to say. I'm going to say a few things, but I'm going to try to keep it short and concise. I think the first thing is we talked about this last time, but I'm going to mention it. We talked about the last meeting, last get together. But I'm going to mention it now that we mentioned choice, right? When it comes to mental health and depression, I feel like people can really take offense to this word. And it can kind of be controversial, but I think that it is so true that you have a choice to be happy or to be angry and sad. There are things that are out of your control, and sometimes their emotions are so big and strong that it feels like you don't have a choice, but you still have a choice to, like you mentioned earlier, Rachel, get up and take a walk, right? You still have a choice to get out the house and meet people. And it wasn't until my college years where I had a college mentor that something had happened internally, and I mentioned to her that it's not a healthy thought. So I don't want people to be triggered, but I'm going to share it because I just want to be honest and truthful here. But I think the darkest that I felt was when I started to, how would you say this? I started to maybe validate or make sense, reason. I started to reason out that my suicide would be good, right? And I'm the type of person that if it's for me, sometimes it's really hard for me to do it. But if I bring in other people, like if it's for them or if it's for this purpose, then it's easier for me to do it, right? And so that's why it was always really hard for me to take my own life, because I felt like it was just for me, it's just for me, it's just for me. But then when I started to reason it, and it made total sense to me, and I brought my dad into the picture. I was like, he's passed, he's gone, and he would understand. Out of everyone, you have this idea of like, like they're still there and they're watching you and they know what you're feeling. Like the rest of the world doesn't know. Like we have this idea, right? Whether that is true or it's just a way to protect ourselves, give us comfort. I had that idea, and I was like, my dad would totally understand. He sees what I'm going through, and he would be so happy to see me when I'm with him again. And like that was the first time I had reasoned it to a point where I felt like I could really do this. This is it. Because I don't think I've ever told anyone, but when I was younger and I was having suicidal thoughts, I was always a very passionate and ambitious, hopeful person, right? And so for whatever reason, and then I think about it now, I think it's God, but I know it's God. For whatever reason, at that time, not knowing, I was like, you know what? Not yet. I kept thinking, not yet, not yet, not yet. And then I said to myself, well, when? Right? When can I do this? And I was like, and if there's nothing there, if there's no hope, then I can go.
Like, I don't know why, but as a kid, I think about it now, it's so sad for me to think like that. But that was my logic. And I was like, okay. So I was at, college. I was still 19 at that time. But I had come to this thought already, that my dad was happy to see me. And I would be too, to see him. And I told my mentor this. I don't know why I told her this, but I told her this. And she was like, you need to go to counseling. So she forced me to go to counseling because she had mentioned it many times before. And I was like, I don't need it. I didn't trust it. I didn't think it was going to help. It's going to be pointless. And until I said that to her, and she was kind of scared, I think. She was like, okay, you're going to go. And I only went so that she would be happy. I went, and I honestly just went for a handful of times. But my first session, I went. And they do their assessment on you, right? They ask you questions, and they kind of assess how sane or insane you are. And at the end of it, he goes, you are clinically depressed. You are sane. You seem to be, you have your head on your shoulders, right? I can offer you a placebo, but that would be what it is. Because I don't think you need anything more. Because like I said, I was very depressed, but I felt like I was a healthy, functioning human being still. But as soon as he told me I was clinically depressed, there was actually a relief that came upon me, or that lifted off me. And people get confused when I say this, but it was because all these years I thought I was crazy. Because there are people in your life that be like, what are you sad about? What are you mad about? Like, get over it, stop crying, things like that. And I finally felt like all of this was real. I have been sad and angry and upset all these years, and that was not a lie. And that felt such a relief for me. It felt like such relief. And then I went a few times, and there were some things that he mentioned. Right? He would say things like, it's okay to not be okay. And I don't know what it was, because I was like, I'm sure that's probably not the first time anyone has told me that, but I felt like that was the first time anyone ever gave me permission to not be okay. And that felt so like I was released from something, And I know this is going on.
No.
There was so many things that I was able to close the doors up. Yeah. I had a best friend in sixth grade, and it's hard for me to share my feelings, but I wanted to tell her one day that I missed my dad, and I told her that. And then the next thing she said was like, oh my goodness, look at that cute boy, And I told my therapist that, and I told him, like, I think, like, that's why I can't share. Like, I felt like someone had shut my feelings down. And he was like, she was a kid. And my immediate thought was like, so, but he was like, but she was a kid and you were a kid. She didn't know what we were going through. And I was kind of angry. You get offended and you get angry and upset. But then that made so much sense to me. Right? So I was able to close some of those doors and say, and like really reason it out, what we kind of talked about. It's not to react right away, but like, hey, give grace to this person, give grace to that situation. And that therapist and those sessions really helped me, I think, change my mindset. It shifted me for real.
Yeah.
Because I thought about Guluning na, and and I was still doing and the things that were involved, right? Everybody comes to prepare for the funeral, to thank God, to do all these things that we need to do in the Hmong culture.
Yep.
But then right? And the people that are still holding on to and struggling and trying to live with what happened is the family, the immediate family, the kids. And Gucci ni high, but I think bây giờ mong being that now at the thầu tính mình lên đó, there's gonna be some hurtful things that you know cái tính năng child would do to you. Cho you know, money hungry people, they will take advantage of you. Cho hai tên này lúc you see now that like you know, things like that I was truly hurt by. And I think as it even as an adult, even my older siblings that were adults at that time, I think I felt like we were always waiting for someone to apologize, to come back and save us, right? To redeem us from what they did to us. Because we talk back to thảo ấy cái tính cho là hại nè, là chỉ hại con nè đấy tiêu, là hại tư you to live the life that he wants to, you know. And I just always felt like someone needed to come and save me. You know, someone needed to apologize, and something needed to happen and be done. And I didn't exactly know what it was, but I think all those years I realized now, or at that point when I had that mind shift, was this whole time I was waiting for someone to come save me, and nobody was coming. And this is the harsh reality of it. Anyone that's listening, there is no one that's going to come save you. Okay, you have to save yourself.
Yes.
And you know, they're married, they have a PhD, they've just bought a house, you know, like things like this. And I'm like, and I'm still here, that little girl that's still depressed, and I've been waiting for you guys. Like this you the things that you must share or you and so I finally said, well, forget it. I have to let that go. Because you're waiting on people that don't even know that you are hurt, right? And I'm sorry, but that's just the way it has to be. You didn't ask for the situation that you were met with, but it happened to you. And there are people that are going to care, and there are people that are not going to care, and there are going to be people that are completely clueless that you were ever even hurt. And so that's the point, going back to it is a choice. Right. So when I had that mind shift, and I was like, I have to take myself out of this, because like I mentioned earlier too, I kept putting myself into it eventually. I was put in it without choice, but then I continued to put myself in it by choice. And I realized that if I could do that, I can take myself out. So I started to do things that I didn't want to do, like go hang out with people. You know, to wake up every day, to go for a walk, to take care of myself. Things like that it sounds simple, but it's so hard when you feel like the world is against you and you feel like there's no way out at all. And so that long story short is really to illustrate that it is a choice, and that's how a choice can happen, right? And that's what forms a choice. And let my life be proof that is how it works. And then the other thing is going along with those lines. We talked about this too. I mentioned this earlier in our other meeting. Is the work doesn't end when you leave the therapist's office.
That's right.
That's just the beginning of the work. So to think that medication and these therapy sessions are going to solve it all is not true at all. And it's not like they advertise that either. We just get into this idea of like, oh, that's going to help me, and it will help you. But you have to do the hard work after that, right? And I say this with everything that I have, that it is a lot of work, but it is worth it.
Yes.
On the flip side of what we were talking about earlier, about how I would, and it's funny because I have these very vivid moments now where and memories of waking up or going to bed not wanting to be alive the next day, and constantly being alive the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and feeling so utterly destroyed by that. And then now I have this feeling of I wake up or I'm getting a cup of coffee, or I'm walking around in the kitchen. I like simple things. I'm brushing my teeth, and I have moments of just, oh my goodness, I'm still here.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Oh my goodness, kucing still kuluning. And I would never have this, and I never have that. I have 3 kids that I love, and they're beautiful and healthy and strong, and that would never come to fruition if I didn't make the choice every day to stay.
Yes.
And then just one last thing to add to all of this that I'm saying is when I got out of my depression. So I really do feel like when I had that mind shift and I stopped going to therapy,
Mm-hmm.
my life completely changed. Like I felt like the depression went away. I felt like I was the way that I was laughing and smiling, the joy in my life was so genuine that I never realized I could feel this way. Like I would laugh and I'm like, this is how it's supposed to feel. Not the fake stuff, not the superficial stuff before, even if I was happy, right? Like this is completely different. And so and you don't know it until you come on the other side. And it is so worth it.
Mm-hmm.
But a couple years in, I want to say maybe 3 or 5 years in, something happened. It wasn't major, but something happened, and I felt an overwhelming feeling that I knew, so familiar, like to my bones. And it took me a while, and I was like, what is this? And as it continued to sit in me, I realized I was depressed. And it's so bizarre, but there's a very distinct feeling when I'm sad, but there's a very distinct feeling when I'm depressed, but really depressed. The emotions of what I felt before, like the dark, weighty emotions that I felt when
Yeah.
when that comes to me,
Yes.
it's so heavy. And I know it immediately, like an old friend, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know you. What are you doing here? You need to leave. Like those are my thoughts. At first I was like just kind of in shock, like, oh my goodness, I thought I was over this.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like I thought we had said goodbyes. I thought I was good for good, and what do I do? And now I realize, I mean, almost immediately too, though, I was like, okay, I can't be here. I know what this feels like. I know what can happen. And I know that if I allow this to take over me, it'd be really hard for me to get out.
Mm-hmm.
So this is to say to people that, yes, you can overcome your depression, but that's not to say you are free of sadness and pain and hurt and depression again, right? So really listen to those triggers, those feelings, and do what you need to do to not stay in there. So there are times where I will feel something, even if it's not really bad, but I feel like it could get bad because you don't really know. I will, if I can't handle anymore, I'll tell my husband, I feel this way and I feel that way. I just want you to know so he can be aware because he's become more aware of, the triggers and my habits. He sees me and I'm an emotional eater.
Yeah.
If I'm like searching the cupboards and getting stuff out and like looking for things, like he knows, like he's like, you need to stop. You don't need it. And I'm like, I know. I just need to fill this void inside of me, because that's what emotional eating is. And I get out. I make the decision to wake up, even if I want to stay in bed. There are still moments where I live in it, right? And I think that's healthy too, but not all the time. And if it's really bad, then don't. But like I picked up art, like mentioned. I do art kind of as another form of therapy for me. And so find good habits, right? Find good habits. Listen to your body.
Yes.
Write. I don't care if you're a writer, but I think it is so important to write because one thing that I learned from my students and learn as I teach my students is I have been writing for so many years that I can look back and I see the patterns. I see the words that come up. I see the images that replay itself again and again, right? So I'm able to make those connections and say, that's why I write about that. Or this is because of this. and to really understand the things that you don't understand. I think that helps you towards healing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I said so much, but just
No, I love it.
you
I'm
need a
taking
mindset,
notes.
healthy habits.
Yes.
Watch out for the triggers. Keep 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 at it. It is hard work, but it is worth it.
Yes. I just want to just so much thank you truly from the bottom of my heart, because these are real, authentic, like you said, raw experiences and advice from a person who really truly has gone through it. And I truly like can relate to everything you're saying, because like you said, it's a choice. And some people say, no, I can't choose, this is just part of who I am, I'm just depressed. No, but like you said, that it is a mindset. You have to make the efforts. And
Yes,
it is hard work. It is hard work. It's just like punching in your time.
yeah.
Because I'm so glad we talked about this the other day as well, because it is a mindset. And I could totally relate to what you said about those sessions that you spent with that counselor. Because I had shared, when I was very troubled from 16 to 28, 29 years old. And I went through lots of counseling and therapy, and it blew my mind. It made me think about this. I'm just going to share it because I just
Yeah.
finally can talk about it.
Yeah.
I remember I had so much anger towards my
Mm.
parents, my mom, my family, my siblings, and towards myself, and everything that happened, especially with my adoption. And finally, this therapist, we were in this session about distorted thinking. Okay,
Mm.
classic topic in therapy. And he just looked at me like, kind of like, so do you expect your family, and do you expect the world, or do you expect this and that? And he just went over like all the things. He kind of just summarized. And I said, yes, I do. I was like, I do, like a brat. And he said, why do you expect so much? Like,
Mm.
can you maybe just say that ideally in your mind, that's what you want, but that's not who they are? And I said, no, because they're my family. No, because when I started to justify everything, and
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? Like, you started to justify why, like you had said, why you want to die, why there's no reason to live anymore, why you don't want to wake up. And then he said, well, can you just be okay that you're woke up and you just don't feel so motivated? Like, does it have to be that extreme?
Right.
Is it that bad if, let's say, your dad couldn't pick up your phone today? Or can you maybe understand and, like you said, give grace, and maybe take a moment to pause and maybe think he might be busy dealing with a lot of other things? And I said, I could. I was like, I could. And then he mentioned about the choice, right? He said,
Mm.
you could choose
Right.
to believe and understand things
Right.
how your depression allows you to, or you can think outside of those emotions and find and entertain other reasons that you might not, like he said, you haven't even verified. You don't even know what's going on with everybody else's life. And that's when I learned, and I decided, oh, I can choose to be in this inner dialogue, right?
Yeah.
This inner world that I have.
Yeah.
And I do this still, and my boyfriend tells me this, but now I acknowledge it. I respect it. I honor it. I go, oh, there is an internal dialogue and mindset that you can, like you said, choose to go into, entertain, and go into this hole. Or you can choose to, like we were been talking about, is go outside, take a walk,
Mhm.
take a pause,
Mhm.
and go enjoy the fresh air, enjoy your cup of coffee, and go do something different other than keep entertaining those thoughts and those
Right.
negative thoughts, because it's going to grow. It's obviously going to grow. I think what I really love what you said too is that, it is a lot of work. People forget
Yeah.
that medications, absolutely, I can vouch for this. No medications and counseling sessions could truly fix and band-aid everything that we've all been through.
Yeah.
Because there are still those days, like you said, is that you still sometimes don't understand why things are the way they are. And it's like an old friend. I love what you said.
Yeah.
It's like an old friend that just comes and you're like, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
So I noticed
It's
that
not a friend you like either.
Yeah, it's not. It's a bad old friend. And so now I realize that sometimes emotions are like that. It's an entity or a feeling that visits you sometimes, or
Yeah.
if not frequently, if you're also, like you said, going through stuff triggered. But you don't have to stay in that at all. And
Yeah.
so you have to work on staying away from that bad friend.
Yes.
We know this. I
Yeah.
learned also this concept where just because you really truly love somebody, it's not
Mhm.
at the same time they're not always best for you.
Yes.
And I think that's same with depression. Like
Mhm.
sometimes you're so familiar with that person or you're so familiar with those things, but they're not always best for you. They're not going to
Mhm.
help you
Yeah.
be the best version of you that day or in your life. And so it's so true is that you have a choice, you have a mindset that you can create. It does get better. There
Yes,
is
it does.
better options and things.
I
And
forgot to mention that. It does. It gets better. It gets
it does.
easier.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because you exercise like a muscle, right?
Yes.
And I was just thinking about this too, how I had practiced this for 20 some years. And then finally, it was just literally 2.5, 3 years ago that I finally felt like, oh, I got this. I
Mm.
finally can
Mhm.
wake up and be like, okay, I kind of feel crappy, but you know what? I'm just gonna go make myself my coffee and get ready and go to work.
Yeah.
You know, like, okay, it's like that bad friend. Okay, I know you're
Yeah.
there, but
Yeah.
I'm not gonna hang out with you today. Okay, you know, I'm not gonna make those bad decisions today. I'm gonna go be responsible. Thank you.
Yeah.
And having a little bit of an attitude with it, having a
Yeah.
little bit of ownership over it. But I think that's part of healing is saying, I know you're there, but I'm not gonna do that today. I'm gonna be, doing something better with my time. I think that's so powerful. And again, I just want to emphasize like this is what the journey is like being in situations where, like you said, you couldn't control. Uh,
Mhm.
and I love that that counselor said, well, you were just a child, or that person was a child.
Yeah.
Really acknowledging that those were in the past. It was at a time where you were very vulnerable, but also a lot of people are clueless. People don't
Yeah.
know. They don't
Mhm.
know. And you can't blame people for what they don't know. And even if you do blame for what they know, they might not even have the skill sets,
Yeah. Yeah. That's true.
or even the capacity to
Yeah.
fully cope with you, especially like you were talking about the Hmong relatives.
Mhm.
I can't even imagine sometimes some of the Hmong relatives to give me the advice that some of the professional like therapists and counselors and mentors and college professors or people that I know that learn more about what depression really is would have
Right.
given me, because again, there was only so much they knew in their own lives. This is
Yeah.
all really all they knew. So, but I know we can go on and on, right? I said
No,
an hour and a half, and now we're at 2 hours. But I want to say to our audience and to everybody that you know, it's never easy to talk about these things, and I hope the goal is that we tell these stories, our journeys, and it will help you come to realization, change your mindset, right? Find hope and move forward, and know that there's so much more out there and outside of that dark hole or the box that you live in. And we appreciate everything that you do every day, like you said, hard work that you do every day, and give yourself that credit. I want to say that to everybody. Give yourself that credit and pat yourself in the back. Be proud of yourself. Like you said, you know, um, you know that it's a choice and you can be out of it. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. Thank you, Maipacher, for everything. Um, I want to just say this message is that together we inspire for a better future. And that is our motto here at Project We Inspire. And I, again, want to wish everybody a wonderful evening, and please be safe out there. And we will provide some resources at the end. So if there's anything, please feel free to reach out to us, message us, and we will hopefully direct you to get support and services. All right. Well, thank you guys. Have a good evening. Thanks, Maipacher.
Thank you.